What's a good word, everyone? It's your boy DKB here. I just want to say thanks for all the support. The channel's been steadily growing, and the number you see below, you can drop a text, shoot a voicemail, any ideas, topics, collabs, etc. you guys want to see. I'll include them in future videos and live streams, and I'll catch you again. Be easy. What's a good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here, and I wanted to dive into our draft class a little bit because looking at all the comments and hearing some of the conversation pieces around this draft class, it feels like many fans are upset with the direction and kind of the approach that we took to things here. And I think when you look at it from a high level, there's a couple things, I guess, a mindset or a perspective that I'm coming from. From one, this coaching staff hasn't had any games, so they haven't done anything to prove us right or wrong in terms of their ability to recognize and identify talent and or coach these guys up, right? Obviously, you're basing it on history, and at least Aaron Glenn's looks really good. Darren Mougey, you can't find a person that's willing to say that he doesn't have an eye for talent. So you trust at face value what they're doing, realistically, just based on what they've been able to do from an experience standpoint. But when you look at this, I mean, you walk out of this class with what feels like at least 3 impact players, 1 high upside guy, and then a couple of dart throws here after making some trade ups. But let's start off with the first pick, right? We have Armand Mimbu, and this feels like the first scenario where the need just happens to fit the talent that was available for the Jets. It was a safe pick. It fit the criteria of everything Aaron Glenn wants in a football team. I won't even say from an individual standpoint, because he seems to kind of have this less of a individualized approach and more of a from a global philosophy standpoint. If you're just looking at this team, everybody fits this mold across the board. Now, whether they have the talent that lives up to wherever they are in the draft chart, depth chart, and things like that, that's up for them, the coaching staff, to help deliver on. But everybody at least fits a baseline of what you want to see. And Armand Mimbu is definitely a solid to great option to have as kind of that face of the new era for Aaron Glenn and Darren Mougey. So no qualms, no concerns there. When you look at the second round, I think the Mason Taylor conversation is a similar enough situation. We had a need at tight end. The talent available kind of dictated that Mason Taylor probably should have been the guy. Now, some of you may have been higher for various reasons on guys like Elijah Arroyo or Terrence Ferguson, for example, but I think Mason Taylor, again, is one of the most consistent, impactful players at tight end in this entire draft class, from not severely lacking in any one particular area, right? Obviously, you can talk about the run and some improvements that need to be there, pass protection, ability, and being able to attack, up the seams and different things like that a little bit more. But this guy is going to bring all of the intangibles you love to see, especially out of, the bloodline conversation. And so I think this is another day one starter, impact player. You pencil him in as tight end 1 on the depth chart. Obviously, he's still going to have to make sure he can earn and secure that role, but I can't imagine Jeremy Ruckert or Stone Smart really being able to challenge him for the mantle of that. So walking away with an impactful guy that probably can get you something similar enough to Tyler Conklin type production, with maybe a better affinity for Justin Fields kind of targeting his tight ends, I think is a plus. Then you get into the third round with Azareye'h Thomas, and I think this was the first questionable decision where you kind of perked up your eyebrows and started thinking about what are the Jets trying to pull here. You just offered a big contract to Brandon Stevens. MC2's coming off a big extension. Sauce Gardner is going to be due a record-setting contract. So you talk about Stickers being a recent draft pick as well, JBC, who the previous staff was high on. You have to imagine, why would we invest in somebody so early? And I think it just comes down to, this seems like a custom fit for Aaron Glenn and Steve Wilks and what they love out of the DB. He's going to fit the cornerback specifications. When you look at the areas of need for like wide receiver and DT and who would have been available, you can definitely make the case that we should have went with one of these other guys. But from a positional standpoint, if you say I am 100% confident in me being able to take this guy and what he does right now and improve this to the highest degree, as opposed to somebody else saying he fits what I need right now and I can get by with this and I feel good about developing him, but he's really serving more of a need, as opposed to us saying we feel like we can get this guy to a Pro Bowl level or such. I take the guy that you feel extremely confident about being able to overachieve with. So there are names like in the wide receiver ranks, Pat Bryant, Jalen Noel, Savion Williams that was available. And I think Jalen Noel would be the more recognizable name as a guy that probably had round 2 talent that, much like Azareye'h Thomas, slipped just due to some runs at other positions. But at defensive tackle, I think Jamari Caldwell was really the only other conversation piece. And considering we walked away from this draft with no defensive tackles at all, even though we picked up a UDFA, that question is going to come up throughout every pick that we have from here on out. Why didn't we go with one of the DTs that was available? And in round 4, I think this is where the conversation really rears its head the most. We went with Georgia wide receiver Arian Smith. A lot of you guys kind of loved this as I was diving into wide receiver rankings over the course of the offseason and wanted me to highlight Arian Smith and what he did really, really well. And ultimately, he's a speedster. He's a crash out when it comes to being able to attack the deep parts of the field. And that's really where it ends, right? You could talk about the athleticism and stuff like that, as well as just kind of the total traits package. But there's huge question marks about the hands. And so for those of us that have been fans long enough to deal with Devin Smith and deal with Stephen Hill, these speedster guys that don't have great hands have never historically worked out well for us. And overall, we've always had a hard time just developing up wide receivers in general. And, you know, even Sean Jefferson, for all the accolades and praise that he gets, it's you can definitely question the job that was done last year as well. So kind of a rough year overall for the coaching staff as a whole, but it's a nice enough dart throw at least. The Jets knew that they wanted a speed element. Arian Smith brings that dimension, and I think at least in this realm, there's kind of a silver lining in that you can look at Dante Thornton, the other wide receiver that brought the size speed element that I feel strongly like would have been the preferred option if he ended up being available for the staff. And then at the defensive tackle position, Deion Walker was sniped from us by the Buffalo Bills, who traded up just ahead of where we were picking at. So outside of the fact that it feels like he was severely overdrafted, I think I saw PFF had him at like 348 in the overall ranking, and I think he was picked at 110 at this particular slot or something. Probably still would have been around for a couple of rounds, but you can never question it. This is a guy that they felt like they wanted, needed, that we'll have to trust that they can figure it out, right? If the hands improve, this is undoubtedly going to be a plus pick. I do question where he fits on this roster, right? You bring in Tyler Johnson. You bring in Tyler Johnson was the Rams guy, and I'm forgetting the other vet that we brought in off the top of my head. But right now, you're probably looking at Arian Smith being in that wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 type conversation. And even then, you might have to carry 6 or 7 to really keep him on the active roster. And I just don't know if, again, for where he was drafted, I don't know if it makes a ton of sense to have those conversations and stuff now. So easily, in my mind, the worst pick of this particular draft class, but with the upside he offers is easy enough to see potential turnaround here, at least as we get progressed through the course of his rookie deal. Malachi Moore, though, might be the best value pick in this draft class for us. We traded up for him. I feel like he could be an impact player, even if he ends up being in that safety 3 conversation for us, which also he can moonlight in nickel and do all of these different things, right? But I was intrigued by the conversation piece around him filling that Brian Branch role and Aaron Glenn reaching out to Brian Branch to kind of get some additional insights on him when it comes to him and his leadership ability. He was a former starter before having the injury that led to Brian Branch, which backseated him before picking back up as a starter once again. But heavy playmaker. I want to say he had 8 interceptions over the course of his career. Obviously gets involved in terms of pass breaks up, has the size that he's not going to be an enforcer, but he can go out there and lay some hits that'll make you question some things over the course of a game. And considering he can fill either or position, it's easy enough to see him making sure that he's playing somewhere between probably 40 to 60% of the snaps in his rookie year, and being able to at least, I don't want to say excel, but again, offer that impact right out of the gate. So love that. And then with the final 2 guys, Francisco Mauigoa, and Tyler Barron. In Francisco's place, I feel like this is really the true core special team guy. They want to give somebody that Chris Branjo would have signed off on, offers the plus athleticism. Even from a linebacker potential standpoint, this is a guy that has shown a propensity to being able to read and react pretty quickly and get there in the backfield. Short tackler. So a lot of elements about him from a special team standpoint that you love that can translate as part of a developmental plan for him. And then with Tyler Barron, I think he more so just fits. We needed a additional guy we can add into the edge rotation. This is a guy that we feel like maybe will never quite be a starter, but and I don't think you're talking about him kind of having a Bryce Huff type of ascension or anything like that, but he's going to be just that hard-nosed kind of guy that just kind of gets the job done, and maybe sometimes it looks ugly, but this is a guy that for stretches, the first couple of weeks, definitely looked like he was dominant, and in other stretches he disappeared before having a couple streaky type plays and situations here and there. So he's 100% an NFL player in my mind, but will he ever be a guy that does more than, let's say 2 to 4 sacks for you? Probably not, but at least there's a conversation piece around you being able to get a little bit more out of him, and it's yet to be determined what a rotation on the defensive line actually even looks for this new version of the Jets defense as a whole. So again, global view, you're talking about having Armand Mimbu, Mason Taylor, Malachi Moore as your immediate impact guys. Azareye'h Thomas is the high upside player that can potentially be the closest thing to replacing that Brian Eccles role for you right out of the gate. Although, again, you guys know me, big Stickers fan, so I'm hoping to see some heavy competition out of him as well. But another guy that I feel like may not be a starter out of the gate, of course, barring injury, but he's a guy that should look really good in spot duty. And then Francisco and Tyler are guys that look like they're going to be special teams players, so nobody's really going to keep tabs on those 2 specifically anyways, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see some standout plays over the course of preseason, right? So it's not as bad as it could have been. I think obviously you say if you go in a couple different directions, such as replacing Arian Smith, which with whatever best DT potentially would have been available, or maybe being a little bit more aggressive to secure someone like Dante Thornton or Deion Walker that we pointed out, this definitely improves overall. But I'm not going to, I don't really do grades and stuff anyways, but I'm not going to be too harsh. I'm not going to be too overly critical or anything like that until we can actually get these guys on the field, see what they look like against some other teams and stuff. And then again, it's year 1. Let's not crucify any of these guys overall. By the time year 4 rolls around, if we're talking about all of these guys at least being in the conversation for extension talks, nobody's going to remember that we hated some of these selections or felt really bad about them at the time. So with that said, let me know what you guys think. What would have been some of your other alternative options out here, or how down bad do you feel like you are about this draft class? And I'll catch you guys again. Peace.